vastly.
Bernie came to San Antonio, and I was shocked how many people were there for him. Also shocked, not really at all, of the Trump supporters that were there losing their shit in the parking lot. Yeah, I believe that shit.
Ads trying to stop, the nationalization of the healthcare insurance industry.
So I
don't want to. Go ahead. I've talked.
I was going to say, yeah, I think it would be useful, I think, to hone in on it. I think Baseline has just done this, is a specific problem that the billionaire, those that are less fond of billionaires, think that billionaires are either uniquely responsible for, at the very least, uniquely contributing to. And I think that a big one is probably going to be the undue influence that people often say that billionaires have on our government, with one example of how that influence is being exerted being healthcare. I guess I would say that I am sympathetic to the idea that billionaires do exert some level of influence on our government, but I don't think it is a tiebreaker in any real sense, and I don't think it is a determining factor. I don't think the reason we don't have federalized healthcare in America today is because of billionaires. I think it is mostly because we have a lot of trouble in this country talking to people when they hear the word socialism or communism, or when we start talking about large federal programs that are going to come into their local communities.
Every time you think about communism, most people, especially conservative people, are like, "Ooh, communism evil." I'm like, "Shut up."
Well, and the argument against billionaires would probably have to wind up being because of that undue influence that they do have. That we have a national narrative against these social programs, which has been, long before we had billionaires. You can see talking about the communist. It's not about the billionaires; it's the people who are
have the most amount of money, right? Like when there's that wealth disparity, people so it doesn't matter if they weren't literally billionaires at the time, right? Yeah. So we point to billionaires because they are at the apex of our capitalist society here, apex of the wealth disparity. They are the top, the embodiment of inequality within of the equality within our system. So yeah, they're a problem, and they don't simply sit around and let their money.
Let's see if I can get in, guys.
Right? What they do, they and part of doing that is by influencing the political system, which they do, right? Whether it be individually or through a corporation that they own, they influence the political landscape in a way that simply ordinary civilians don't have the ability to. Simply up and down, do not have the ability to do that in that scale. You can't have lobbyists in their ears 24/7, ordinary individuals, to advocate for workers' rights. It's just not unless you have a union. Not unless you're a union.
Yeah, we have unions who lobby too, right? And
unions are usually the top
lobbying organizations.
The unions haven't been good. Well, the unions have been good.
Union membership has fallen drastically.
No, it has, but that's because people. There's systemic issues, yes, but also people don't want to be a part of them as well.
That's mainly because I would argue that's mainly because of propaganda.
How many people on this panel are in a union? None of us.
I would like to be in a
Not right now.
You and I have been in the technology sector.
If there was a union for the type of work I do, I would be in it.
Yeah, the technology has not even had a chance to be unionized, right? They've right now, we're only seeing the start of that. For instance, in the video game sector. In the video game sector, they're actually only starting talking about unionization because of the gross abuses that have been happening to them, right? That's what's happening right this second. But the technology sector specifically has been kept out of unionization efforts by those, tech futurists that were going to save the world. But I don't know. Provide
unionization is largely not in tech because people like to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I think the turnover in tech is pretty high. People like to switch their jobs every 3 years in tech.
Yeah, I'm advocating for myself.
I'm not union.
Wait, maybe it's
buy into some company I don't give a shit about.
Wait, maybe they switch their jobs around all the time because they're not treated Like,
no, because they want more money.
You know, do you work in tech?
You're hitting.
No,
You're not treated right. You're underpaid.
More.
They want you to do more work for less.
Exactly.
They do the same exact things.
Sorry.
I'm in tech.
Don't
I deal with it all the
tech.
time.
Y'all make...
Every fucking job I've had, it's been the same story. It's lather.
This is something that's just going on right now with capitalism.
Are underpaid? What are?
Yes, everyone in
ridiculous. Are you?
Everyone in America is drastically underpaid. It is It is within the capitalist's best interest to pay you as a worker, as a member of the working class, as least as possible.
Yeah, I know.
That's still keeping you employed.
That's why we sign agreements, right? That we think are what our labor's worth. Then we take that money that's paid to us, that capital. We become capitalists ourselves, and we invest in markets, and we become capitalists with the capitalists. That's what a capitalist society looks like.
Make sure you max out your Roth IRA.
What happens is laughable. What happens is you go and apply, and the boss, because of the fact that there is an excess amount of people that are looking for jobs, you can say, I need this much money. And then, like, let's say I need 18 an hour. My boss says, I'm only offering 15 an hour. Like, I don't decide what I want, what I need to be paid. My boss decides that.
We were talking about
it's not an agreement. It's not an agreement.
That is an agreement.
Absolutely set my price.
No, not if
you go somewhere else.
But the thing,
But
the thing is, workers
go?
have no bargaining
What's
power.
it going to cost you to move? What's it going to cost you to go to another locale? What's it going to cost you to get another job?
We're talking about tech. You work from home. You're talking about your together.
That's not how it is.
So what we ran into is a bit of a couple of different problems, right? Sorry, I'm going to scroll over your name. Monty? Is that?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. So Monty, one of the things that we would talk about is, or what you're illustrating would be something called monopsony, or the accumulation of power for certain individual small companies in that area, in an even smaller area, or large companies in an even smaller area. The question that capitalists would say was, I don't have to take that $15 an hour job if somebody else will hire me at 18. What unions are supposed to do, and why they're encouraged by law in the United States, encouraged through the law, is they allow all of those people that don't have that same lobbying power as, let's say, a billionaire that wanted to hire a lobbying firm. They allow that concentration of power through workers to be able to talk and work with their business, so the government doesn't have to be involved.
So why do they only represent 11% of the population? It's because a lot of them are corrupt, and there are systemic
bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on that. There has been a concerted effort to kill unions since the Reagan administration. It is such a fucking bullshit statement.
There's been a concerted effort not to join them as well.
Hold on, let them finish it. Yeah, okay. Is it Gambit? Are you the one?
Yeah, let me interject.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, there are systemic problems, which I've said both times I've talked now, but people like Jason probably didn't hear that. But anyway, there are systemic problems, but the reality is also people aren't running to join unions at all in any way. Like, that's why it represents such a small amount.
Starbucks? I don't know.
There's a huge push of Starbucks. There's now than there was before.
Hold on. There's been pushes for Amazon unionization for a while.
You gotta let him finish his argument.
Sorry, hold on. Don't worry. I got it. Don't worry. Dustin, don't worry. I got it. So, go ahead, finish up, and then I want to go to OnlyFacts.
Unionization is actually down. There were more people in unions last year and the year before that than there are now. Blah, blah, blah.
OnlyFacts.
I want to first state, I find it very disingenuous people to defend the status quo when the status quo has never been this more disparate in
since the French Revolution.
Between the lowest paid and the highest paid. So in 2018, I ran for Commissioner of Labor for the state of Oklahoma, and I had calculated that working 40 hours at the quality of living in the year 1960, 60 years later, requires about 69 hours of work. So you almost have to work 80% more to live the same quality of life 60 years ago. Secondly, the factor, the multiplication factor between the lowest paid, the highest paid in corporations 40 years ago, 50 years ago, has gone about 20, 30, 40 times now than it was 30, 40 years ago. So not only is this inequality increasing, but it's becoming worse and worse and worse. Now, regarding actual unions, from the years of Ronald Reagan and the FAA and a total social cultural demonization of unions, right to work laws being passed. When I ran for Commissioner of Labor, I had graphs showing where in the state of Oklahoma, the year they started to do right to work and get rid of unions, you can see that the average pay for laborers and workers and teachers actually starts to stagnate and then go flat, whereas other states that still did not have right to work but still had unions.
Yeah, whether they can't get rid of unions, as you said, right? They can't get rid of unions.
Excuse me. And that is why.
Well, just start claiming my.
Excuse me.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
Okay. When I start talking, I'm gonna say excuse me. And we can never have an actual conversation. Let some dipshit ramble on for like 10 fucking minutes.
I can help you out. All right, thanks. No problem. All right, thank you. You're assisted. Go ahead. Only facts.
Oklahoma now has a problem where. Well, actually, let me address that dipshit comment. The problem is the unwillingness to listen. This tendency to always come on these goddamn panels. A lot of people with this, oh, it's laughable. Oh, this is a joke. Oh, these are socialists. These are leftists. How about people come here with ears wide open? I have not attacked one position here yet. I have only represented my position.
Actually, defend your statement.
The last position I want to say is that Oklahoma currently has problems with teachers going to Texas. That's it, because our pay has not kept up with the rest of America. Where we've gotten so atomized that teachers can't unionize and even fight for their own collective.
Why can't they unionize?
We are not attacking right to work. We are not attacking anybody else's platform here. We're just saying.
Why can't they unionize? You just said teachers can't unionize.
Because whenever you try to
hold on. I want to let OnlyFacts defend the dumb statements he says. What structural system is stopping them from unionizing other than themselves? Go ahead.
Other than themselves. Okay, let's see. It's billionaires. When you have billionaires who are propping state legislators and governors and presidents who will allow this to happen.
There's legislation that can't join. Hold on. You mentioned billionaires. You mentioned legislation. So the billionaires are going to them and saying don't join, or is there legislation that says that they can't join? Tell me what's stopping them from unionizing. You said that it was billionaires, which was stupid. You said that it was legislation, which was stupid. So can you tell me what's stopping them from joining?
Gambit, how about you stop calling people stupid and laughable and listen?
I'm saying stupid shit then.
No, you're
why
not.
don't you actually?
The thing is you don't even listen.
Let Tax handle it.
Let me say this: is you, as you complain of other people not listening.
The problem with
GSU
is he just throws out ad homs when he doesn't understand what the fuck is going on.
For the last 40, 50 years,
and that's
starting with Reagan, who literally got rid of the entire FAA,
you lost the fucking debate, bro. You already fucking
power
lost.
Control guys over their strike. There has been a constant demonization culturally in movies, in films, in the way we discourse. Like you haven't even considered.
So only facts. Does any of this stop you from joining a union?
I think you need to help define what your right to work state does, because that's the same thing here in Nebraska. So explain that to him. We'll set the cultural stuff aside and bring in Reagan up. Tell him what the effects of the right to work legislation, how that impacts and gets rid of unions.
For example, look at where just the recent Amazon strikes, threat to walk out, et cetera, where the companies were allowed to put up signs in bathrooms and in change-out rooms, and just these veiled threats of, well, we can just pick up this factory and leave. I mean, when there's a threat of a town losing its factory, well, you really don't have a choice then. The right to work becomes a threat to work. You either accept it or get fucked. The factory's leaving. Why are states in America held hostage? Why do car companies like Toyota, Hyundai, and Kia go to Alabama and Georgia? Because they know that
you're saying there's nothing to stop. I was listening and waiting, but
I told you moneyed interests are what is stopping it.
Yes, the conspiracy. Is it the Jews?
Oh wow!
No, help him.
That's cute.
Help him
Just like the
I
big
didn't realize we
shadowy
were going
money
anti-Semitic tonight.
Help him grasp the concept of what's the.
Hey, Dustin, you
the
seem like you can do it, right? Can you do it, Dustin? He seems to not be able to. Can you?
Very vague.
You are so rude, and the thing is, you're so bad faith.
I don't care.
I just explained it to you.
Well,
I just explained it to you.
explain it,
You
though.
don't want to understand. No, yes, I
You
did.
said you said
You
big
said
shadowy
putting
money.
up signs in the back, putting
not
up
an
signs in the bathroom saying
Is
we do not be in the
money?
union. It's stopping
I literally said they lobby. They literally
get lobby to not have people unionized. This is stupid.
They do lobby to not have people unionized.
Amazon,
That's where right to work laws come from. What are you talking
Go
about?
over the Amazon. Can somebody go over the Amazon thing that just happened recently, where literally they've got posters on the wall illegally saying, "Oh, you ought to do this, you ought to do that," and basically implying certain things that they can leave town. They can do. I mean, you have Amazon literally.
What Gambit is looking for is something more along
Gambit's
the
looking
lines.
for nothing.
Well,
you can't
in
even
the
collect
scale of-
union dues in some places because of right to work laws, and that,
There you go.
That
That's
stars out the
something-
unions from being able
Correct.
from being able to go out and do what they do, which is organize and get organized
And lobby.
labor and lobby and all the other
lobby
things.
their politicians, right? So that would be one of your major differences in a right to work state, Gambit, right? So if we look at,
hold on, wait. I just make sure I'm understanding. You said there are right to work states that are stopping unions because they're stopping them from collecting dues.
That's correct.
but what they don't do is they don't ban the practice of collecting dues. What they say is you cannot force somebody to pay dues, right? So as somebody
They're not
that's
stopping
not,
it at all.
right. So as somebody that's not in a union, I don't have to pay you dues, right? So then I can still get the benefits of that labor if it's a unionized job. I'm not going to be excluded from getting the pay raise or whatever for whatever my job is. So what they do will say, okay, you can still collect dues. You just can't force Joe Schmo to, pay you dues. And if somebody's going to sit there and say, okay, I don't have to pay dues and I'm still going to get the benefit of organized labor, I won't pay dues. It therefore undermines the financial backing that the union has to hire the correct sort of lobbyists in comparison to the owner of the company. Does that make sense?
I think.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So like, well, I guess OnlyFacts was talking about Wisconsin, correct? And what happened there? What happened there was a travesty, excuse me. And no, there are sectors of workers who literally cannot collectively bargain anymore, right? Who are banned from being able to collectively bargain anymore. And like they specifically named different sectors.
That's fucking
who
great.
couldn't do
That's
that
fucking
anymore.
hilarious.
And then what was it, Dustin?
What was stopping them? That's what I'm asking. When you
the
said
law itself. Okay, so so there's a law. The budget repair bill, Wisconsin, in 2011, Wisconsin Act 10, a budget repair bill. This was passed by Scott Walker. I remember when it happened at the time. There were massive protests within the Capitol when that happened. People organized to try to stop it. Unfortunately, they did fail. And this bill was passed, and it's had a massive impact on collective bargaining in the there.
I guess I'm just trying to understand. What did the law specifically say? People can't collectively bargain in a union? Because he said that they stopped people from collecting dues, but it was really they couldn't force you, and it was voluntary. So I'm just trying to understand when you say the law.
Let me also clarify some of that too.
I can. Okay, so do you want to go? Because I can list what he's asking. Do you want me to, or do you want to go?
Go ahead.
No problem. You do it better. You will do it better.
So collective bargaining. The law limits collective bargaining for most public employees to wages. Total wage increases cannot exceed a cap based on a consumer price index unless approved by referendum. So you need a referendum to get like wage increase by like a certain amount. Yeah. Contracts are limited to 1 year and wages frozen until the new contract is settled. So what else we got here? We have I was looking. Child care, labor, child care. Sorry. Okay, so child care.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just trying to understand what contracts were limited to. The contract between the union and the company, or workers in every company they worked for.
The union and the
union contract with the company. Gotcha.
I believe that's what I believe.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So child health care authority. The law repeals the authority of home health care workers under Medicaid program to collectively bargain. The law repeals the authority of family child care workers to collectively bargain in the state as well. What else? We have they had debt restructuring. They had health insurance contributions. So they changed the contributions, basically like upping their premiums. So it fucked up their take-home pay as well. So basically, it's just making it less attractive to be within the union. But there's a whole list of things. Again, under the guise of budget restructuring.
So I can agree that everything that you just read for Wisconsin seems draconian. Seems really bad. Right. Mm-hmm. So I don't disagree at all. This does seem like an example of people attempting to limit unions.
Sure.
Is there something more national as well? Or like I'm not trying to minimize what happened in Wisconsin. What happened there seems bad from what you just read.
Yeah.
But unions seem to have fallen out of favor nationally.
Right. So
is it that they fell out of favor? Is it that it was a natural progression? Like it seems like, I think the pushback that Jason is giving you and OnlyFacts is giving you is focused on this thought that it was just like a natural progression, that workers decided, you know what, we don't really need collective bargaining, right? Like, in fact, we're actually just better at doing this ourselves, right? Or did that happen in a vacuum on its own? Or was there a legislative push, right? Was it like when Reagan helped break the air traffic controller strike, right? That was like a big moment, right?
I genuinely think the individualism in our country is the reason most people would rather advocate for themselves. I don't think it's tied to this corporate culture. Now, of course, there's going to be no citation that I can give you for this, but the overall individualism that we've been moving towards more and more, I think, is the reason for these things. Even when I talk to like people that would probably benefit from joining a union, that's their entire ideology, and I don't think they've been fed something from corporations. You can even see this in people at very young ages, right? So I don't think it's not like in the atmosphere like that. So I think it's just the individualism of our like evolution that is causing people.
You don't think there was anything legislatively, right? Sorry. I'm trying not to put words in your mouth. Do you not think that there was anything beyond that, some sort of general cultural shift? Because like what you're talking about, the country that we have, right? This individualistic country, like existed far before the labor unions started decreasing, right? That individualistic spirit is not a new thing, right? So are you saying it's just that? I mean, because we spent decades and decades and decades fighting for those union rights, right? Fighting to collectively bargain, right? Advancing all that. So you don't think any of the was it the Taft-Hartley bill or something, right?
Is there some non-zero amount? Absolutely, but I think the death to community and blah blah blah, I think those things are far more prevalent than why people think the way that they do.
I think I'm
not arguing that there's a zero. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think one of the major problems with trying to organize a union, first of all, is because there are so many barriers to actually organizing. I mean, you have to talk to your coworkers, then you need to like speak with a union organizer. You need to start a committee. A lot of people like aren't ready to undertake these. A lot of people don't know about their rights, right? Like they gotta get union support cards. They like have to vote, negotiate a contract. These are things like, for example, if we're trying to like target as many people as possible, like you have like in the largest industries, right? Like the service industry, transportation. Like truckers are not. Truckers are often in their own cab, driving across the country, far away from the rest of their employees. Fast food employees, there's high turnover. Employees are usually young. They aren't educated on this. The reason why right to work is so problematic is because unions need a momentum to continue to spread, and that's why
Give me a second, guys.
they should have the right to immediately bring in and force those dues upon people. It's because we should be trying to get as many people into unions as possible, because ultimately you can change unions from the inside. They are an inherently democratic institution, and you do have the power to vote people out. I think that these are things that employees across the country in varying industries need to be educated on, right? I think they need leaders, and I think that they need the education so that they can approach these in realistic, manageable ways, because it is very difficult.
I think that's a source of.
I just want to say one last thing, that I'm done. But like Gambit, you specifically asked for national. Like, was there a national effort? Like, it's what I mentioned before, the Taft-Hartley Act. Are you familiar with that?
I think so. Not by name, at least.
Well, the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947, it's an old act, but like it limited the power of unions, right? So it was the National Labor Relations Act previously, right, which established a lot of the powers of the unions, but then Taft-Hartley Act limited that. Like it rolled back those labor relations board. Like that's like a start to like the pushback on labor, but then that continued on, right? There are multiple points in history on the national level where there was a pushback on labor through federal legislation. So putting that out there, but someone else go.
Yeah,
I think the source of. I think a source of the sort of breakdown in communication here is that I think the point that OnlyFacts and then Dustin to a lesser degree are trying to make is that a lot of these legislations and regulations don't explicitly prevent unionization, so as they make it much more of a hostile environment to unionization. And statistically, they're going to bring the amount of people that join unions down and bring the amount of the amount of unions that there are successfully down as well. Whereas GSU Gambit, I think you've been looking more for some sort of hard nail in the coffin. Well, where does it say they can't do unions? I don't think anybody is trying to say that they can't do unions, just that it's a lot harder to, and that means that there's going to be less.
It's not about some hard nail. It's about some unjust push that would necessitate that less people are joining unions. And like I'm reading through some of this stuff, and it seems like some of these things were wanted because of tyranny of unions and what's the word I'm looking for? Corruption of unions and stuff. So, like, I hear y'all's side of this, but y'all are more informed on this topic than me. Would y'all say there's
what about the corruption of corporations?
Would y'all say, I'm not talking about the corporate, we're talking about unions right now. Stay on task, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the.
Would y'all say that there are equal people who are saying that some of these things that were legislated against, like the excessive dues, initiation fees, and all this, there's probably people out there that are saying these things in unions were bad, and this is why that legislation was put forth, not just all the ideological reasons y'all are proposing.
So, just to bite off of that, would you say that most people were in a union beforehand?
I don't know. Okay. I've been trying to look up that graph. I was trying to look up a graph of United States history with union workers and union percentage, but I can't find that.
All right. So if we take each other at face value, and you say that perhaps it's a little more individualistic and deciding against unions, if I was to sit here and say that if I could frame a bill in a quote unquote, from my perspective, it would be a negative way, right? If I could frame a bill to regular constituents that aren't unionized by sitting there and saying, hey, these unions are forcing people, workers, to take money out of their paycheck to pay themselves. Would you vote for or against that? Does that seem like something that would be...
I would vote against that.
So
I first look into it, possibly see if it's true, and if that seemed to bear data to support it, then yeah, of course I vote against it. So I think stealing is bad, right?
Right, of course. So as the public perception of unions got more and more demonized. Is kind of what we're only facts and I are
you
getting
saying
at.
it's justly demonized, though? Are you saying that there are corrupt unions that we can point to and we can say, yes, these unions were bad, and that probably did injurious damage to the idea of being in a union?
Right. No doubt that there are corrupt unions, especially if you look at racial politics post the civil rights movement. You're going to notice a lot of white people trying to secure their job in upper management by saying, as long as you were a member of a union before, similar to the grandfather clause for Jim Crow laws, right? Mm-hmm. Was almost the exact same thing that was done during unions at the time. That's certainly something that should have been legislated against, and actually did becoming legislated against. So not only did they attack the idea of taking somebody's funds away from them, but also they also advocated for, and Ronald Reagan was pretty not well known for this, but did push in this area. One of the few good areas that he pushed for race-wise was to sit there and say that they are using discriminated practices to not hire blacks. Right? So if we take those things and we shoot them out culturally, and we become very anti-union just off of those things, and people in the general public not determined or needed to be supported by unionized labor, or in this case, how you put it and how I understand it, becoming more individualist, right? Mm-hmm. As we start to build those policies on, you can't take union dues just because you negotiate for this person. You cannot use a grandfather clause for all your higher union representation. I would be very willing to grant you those things, just off of that alone. The problem that we have is that we have a very lopsided, top-down, corporate-led market because of some of those laws decreasing the ability to unionize. So along with your idea of an individualistic society.
Yeah, so we can definitely build some bridges, right? Okay, sure. So one thing I can definitely agree with, that of course capitalists would have used any sort of corruption in order to try to push legislation to help their cause. I don't disagree with that at all. Mm-hmm. My bigger wonder, though, is the people turning away in those instances. Was it due to the legislation, the capitalist mentality, or was it due to the damages that were done to them? Like, y'all keep referring to people not being able to force people to pay dues, but it seems like that comes out of a corrupt culture, right? So it seems reasonable. I'm not saying it doesn't help capitalists at all, but if the basis of that was some sort of corruption, it seems like even though this is going to help capitalism, which is a bad thing, y'all, it seems like the reasonable thing to happen.
Well, there's
right?
a check for that, though. There's a check for that, though.
Hold on. One second. If people saw
the
value
help me understand that word corruption. Can you expand on that for me?
So when you were just referencing, what situation did you just reference? I can't remember what you just referenced when you talked about, yes, blah, blah, blah. But if unions are, whatever you said they were doing to black people, I can't remember exactly what you said.
Oh, okay.
I was listening to you right now.
Management, the grandfather.
Yeah, all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you said something about money too. I can't remember exactly what you said though.
Forbidding people from unions are forbidden from forcing people to pay union dues, despite the fact that they are despite the fact that they do benefit from those negotiations.
Yeah, 28 of the 50 states.
You said something else though, and I can't remember what you said. But I can't remember what you said right now. I'm like,
I can't either. I've had too many fucking concussions.
No, it's cool.
I'd like to jump in just on that point about union dues, guys. I think what we have to recognize is across the country, we've seen states enact right-to-work laws that have made union dues voluntary, right? Meaning that not all union dues paying has been eliminated, but in lieu of paying a union due, There are administrative fees or service fees that members of unions will pay to retain, right, coverage by the union contract, but these are voluntary, okay? And part of the voluntary nature of these things is derived from an old Supreme Court case, the Beck case, right? Where, and this starts to explain the divergence from between union interests and workers' interests. Unions became essentially massive political action committees, started devoting tons of monetary resources to political campaigning and political contributions, and workers were upset with this. Consequently, the Beck case allows workers to recover portions of their union dues that are being used for political activity or political contributions. This divergence between union interests and their movement into the realm of politicking is at odds with worker interests, particularly when those workers don't agree with those political priorities or strategies.
You're talking about Beck v. Ohio, correct?
Well, it sounds like you're saying that there was
so it's from there
reasons
that we see
for
why we have union dues not being required in all states, but there are still unions can still charge administrative fees that workers have to pay to retain coverage by their collectively bargained agreements.
It sounds like you're saying there's reasons that these things happen, like I was saying earlier.
But
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not just the state saying you can't charge dues anymore. No, there are valid reasons because workers are being coerced to essentially fund political action activities that union leadership were engaging in. When they didn't agree with that's unfair to workers.
But that's how you effectuate policy.
Well, yeah. The question
if we don't want to affect a certain policy that union leadership wants to as a worker, why are we obligated to pay for that? Those activities aren't actually providing us any protections under the collectively bargained agreement.
So the example may help draw a clear line, right, is if I still want to be represented by a union, but I'm vastly pro-choice, and my only choice is representation that continuously gives to a party that is correct.
Pro-abortion rights, yeah.
Right. So that would be a way in which Beck v. Ohio is the case that you're referencing, correct? That would be a case in which it would say, okay, this person just wants the collective bargaining aspect, but how the dynamic of our representative government works is that unions decide which politicians get those funds. So
it sounds like if you support politicians that person doesn't, now they have the option to not donate to you because you're supporting political policies they aren't in favor of. That's not bad.
This is literally no different than interacting within a corporation, right? Like, well, I don't
have to donate to my PAC. I don't have to donate to the PAC that my company has.
Right? No, but you don't decide like which where your company spends its political action money, right? Like you don't actually decide. You don't get a say in that, right?
I would give them.
But in the union, you could actually maybe get a vote, right? Like in that case, you actually could get a vote as to where that money might go. But within a corporation, no, you don't actually get to.
Yeah, but I don't give the corporation
now whether
money
it's
to donate.
Being forced to be a part of a union. I think that's something different. Saying like, okay, well, I don't want to be a part of this union. I don't want to be part of their collective bargaining at all. Okay, that makes sense, right? But if you want to be, part of that collective bargaining, well, then vote within the structure, right? Vote to change it, and go from there. Guys, I need some more cameras. Like GSU, come on, camera.
All right, I want to see your bright, shiny faces.
I would be sympathetic to that, Prime, except that what we see across the country is that unions are generally closed shop, right? You have to, and you are at job jeopardy if you do not join the union. There are very few places, and these are in even in right to work states, we have closed shops, but nonetheless, in corporations, there's a fundamental difference. I choose to work for GE. If I don't like what GE is doing, I can walk away from that job. Joining,
continue.
choosing to work for the city of Detroit, Michigan, forces me to be represented by AFCIO, and if I don't want to be represented by them, my employment is terminated.
I mean, is that not the same standard?
Of if you want to have this job, then you're going to have to be part of the corporation, or you're going to have to be part of the union. You have to walk away.
Unions don't actually solicit the vote of their workers to determine where they're pushing a worker.
Well, I don't think that
contributions to political interests or political.
I don't think that's
well.
relevant.
Hold on, I don't. Well,
yes, it is because that was Prime's
it does
point.
become relevant, but I don't think it becomes. I don't think that's a fair gaffe because technically, union representatives are voted upon, just like an electoral system. Correct. So it's the same. It's the same system. Your union representative must be approved by those workers. So
sure,
technically,
but when we join
yeah,
a
but
union,
they're having to give money to this though. This is different.
Bargain, right?
Well,
we're joining a union collectively bargain over wages and conditions of employment. Right?
Correct.
Unions don't exist to collectively organize workers to support specific public policy preferences or political candidates. Right? We're being told all the time that unions exist to protect workers. That's
which the workers can't protect you if the laws don't allow them to do so. Thereby, they have to have some hand in the politics that are going on. Otherwise, they're always going to be on the back end where they can't do anything because people who have corporate interests are going to continue to create laws to make it harder for workers to organize. So, at some point, a union has to be involved in politics. It has to happen for it to continue to perpetuate its existence.
So long as lobbying exists. One of the things that I was really interested
Wait, nobody's saying that unions couldn't do that. We're just saying that people shouldn't be required to get to that if they don't support those policies.
Pay for unions' political activities.
Are they?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, thank you. I was going to say, is the compellment not equal on both sides? If you don't like something about the job, for example, if you don't like the amount of money they're giving you, you can either take it or you can quit. If you don't like the union at a particular place of employment, you can quit and go work somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, okay, I was just confused because it seems like there was a unique...
Now, would you agree that in that case, that would be a disparative outcome in favor of the corporation?
What the union? Well, yeah, which one? In which case?
In the case
that they quit and they go somewhere else and they aren't unionized.
Would the corporation benefit more than the union by that quitting?
And the thing is, too, the union means something even if that person isn't paying dues. Because the biggest part of unions has to be the numbers. You have to be a financial interest for the company. If there's not a lot of people in your union, nobody gives a fuck about your company.
No. The union needs to have resources to actually do the collective bargaining, to do all the things that are involved to run that organization, right? But those people aren't contributing. If they actually aren't contributing, then they're not part of and getting all the benefits of that work, right? Then those and we've seen, like, it's not like I need to make this up, right? We've seen what happened in Wisconsin in terms of unionization, right? Like it all fell apart.
We agree that the Wisconsin stuff sounds bad.
Well, no. So
I have to look into it to completely agree, but it sounds bad on face.
What happened in Wisconsin is that the state decided that public sector unions ought not exist. And that's not a bad policy. Going as far back as FDR, you see FDR advocating against public sector unions because what you have in that situation is that government unions negotiate with friendly politicians at the local and state levels over taxpayer money. It literally pits the public interest at odds with union interests. And as we've seen in states like California, Wisconsin, what's happening
unions
there?
Are workers.
We're seeing California's pension costs soaring 2,000%.
Bullshit. Wow.
Same thing in Oregon. So public sector unions are not a good thing. And I bet you guys 100 to 1, we start talking about police unions. What happens now? What happens to the argument?
I feel like one of the ways we can sidestep a lot of these problems is by attacking the direct institution of lobbying. You know, Andrew Yang had a innovative, although heavily criticized proposal that I personally found interesting. He introduced the idea of democracy dollars, where lobbying would be done by individual voters. But I think what we need is to try to find ways to sidestep Citizens United and to try to get this this type of lobbying out of the hands of PACs and so on. I think we can sidestep a lot of problems regarding corruption when we place that lobbying power in the hands of individual voters.
Well, you're just not gonna have.
Are people against the workers? That's the reality.
Yeah, so I don't. So debate board. I hate this idea of which you pitting the public unions against like the taxpayers, right? As if that's what they actually. No, it's not, right? Like the taxpayers, part of the taxpayer. What are you doing when you pay taxes, right? You're paying to run the city. You're paying to run the city. You're paying to have services fulfilled, right? Those services cost money, and they cost money because workers are involved, right? It just doesn't happen automatically. So, those workers deserve both protections, right? Unions can help provide, and also collective bargaining, so that they can increase their wages for an employer. The city acts as just another employer, right? An employer that wants that, and that an employer that has different priorities, right? Like any employer does, right? And different priorities it's working for, right? The unions simply help elevate the priority of the workers. Now, it's not the only priority. There's others, right? And that they have to balance. Fair enough, right? But if they don't have those unions, if you're saying that, oh, well, let's just get rid of public unions, then those individual workers can be crushed, right?
The argument against public sector unions is not an argument against workers and
representation,
suppressing pay. The argument against public sector unions is that to continually increase pay, improve and benefits, right, necessarily means allocating more of a city budget, right, to compensation and to benefits. Where does the money come from to pay the compensation and benefits? It comes from taxes. And consequently, unions have a vested interest in, motivating their workers and motivating residents, right, to vote for politicians that will increase taxes. And unions have a direct stake in the ever increasing of taxes because it funds, right, what they're negotiating for. I see that as a corrupt circle.
Why not benefit the workers and not the fucking government? That's what I don't understand your take at all.
Well, the workers are the government in this sense, aren't they not?
Right.
And they're the public as well.
I think what he's trying to, I think what Debate Board is trying to say is that when you have an institution that has a vested interest in not really trying to see like a universal good in terms of like the public spending, but just trying to increase wages, what the problem that you run into is that you start to run into fiscal problems where the workers are compensated to a degree that while it's great for the workers, may not be the best for like that local economy, the local budget.
Of course,
other things can get neglected, and you begin to like run into problems that way. I think that's
why there's a negotiation. That's why there's a negotiation.
Yeah,
you're not going to get everything you want.
Collective bargaining isn't
but
collective
when these
like
unions
autocracy.
get more and more powerful, they're going to have a much stronger position in those negotiations, right?
So Prime, what happens is depending on the city, right? Large cities have mayor council systems of government, right? You have a labor relations department that negotiates with the union on behalf of the mayor.
You'll want to look at New York City would be your prime example of how the union.
Or the city of Detroit, similar structure, right? So what happens then is unions, right? They have a outsized influence in these large cities where they represent tens of thousands of workers, right? Where I'm from, the city of Detroit, and where I worked in the city of Detroit, we had 18,000 employees working for the city of Detroit, and 90% of them were represented by a variety of different unions. Generally, it's your HR folks and confidential assistants to executives who are exempted. And so consequently, when you also have then the combination of residency requirements, where you have lots of city employees required to live in that city, unions are representing them, unions are negotiating for benefits and wages, Those have to be paid for, right? Necessarily, then you either reduce the level of city service or you increase taxes, or a combination of both. Consequently, unions are participating in local politics to get elected friendly politicians who would negotiate with them. And Jason, yes, they don't always get what they want because there is some fiscal prudence. But on the other hand, when you look at negotiations in these cities, you don't see pay tables going down. You don't see benefits being reduced generally. This stuff is incrementally going up and up and up, whether it's 1%, 2%, or otherwise.
Well, hold on. So do you not want the city to compete with other industries for these workers? Like, if you want the city to have great workers, they're going to have to compete. So you're saying that that's a bad thing, that wages go up for workers that are doing a great job?
Because your argument isn't, you don't want to necessarily make that argument, because these city services have monopolies.
Let's get Dustin first, and then Zen.
Okay. Because these city services have monopolies on the services that they provide, right? So police unions have a monopoly on being police unions, on being police. And we would all like it to stay that way. We don't want private police forces, correct? We don't want private...
Yes.
Right?
We agree.
Right. Okay, so we all agree on that. Debate 4's question, statement, and problem with, I believe, is sitting here and saying how circular and intertwined and interfed those unions become because of those... With politicians.
It becomes a positive feedback loop for the union where it keeps everything, but you don't, the problem is that you don't see these reflected in the economy outside of the union, right?
And that becomes
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, please. Go ahead.
well, yeah, you say because the argument is against unions because they're quote unquote always self-feeding, right? Because
that's not why I say that's not.
Oh well, then fucking go ahead.
Let's hear it.
You said it's not reflected outside the because we have private sector unions are gone, right? It's not reflected outside the economy, like in terms of pay raises, right? Because private sector unions are gone. Public sector unions is where like we've been holding the line, and to say that the wages of workers in America have stagnated, right? Like the buying power has fallen because of the lack of collective bargaining. That's what that looks like. So year by year, yes, the wages go up, but buying power goes down in general, right? Because prices increase, right?
Right,
so
right.
If prices are increasing,
I agree.
Buying power should go up.
But the reason why I pointed that out is because when you have these positive feedback loops with these institutions, right, and just because unions represent workers doesn't mean that we shouldn't be critical of the institution. When any institution becomes too powerful and it starts to create that like positive feedback loop, it's going to end up creating negative consequences, no matter what the initial motivations were.
What evidence are they too powerful? That's doing a lot of work. Too powerful.
Well, it's what debate board brought up, right? Like,
well, I don't think
for example,
it's not that they're too powerful. Local and state governments have a finite pool of financial resources to pull from, right? To pay their workers, to pay for services, to pay for investments, yada yada yada. This is different than a corporation who can borrow money, who generate their own revenue, right? So
they do that. A city does exactly that.
Cities do borrow money. Cities do generate their own revenue.
Yeah, they can do exactly that.
You can't unlimitedly tax
because I have experience.
We're not asking them to. Go ahead.
I have experience. Like, I've worked for the Department of Education in Kansas. And when I got there...
Jesus, you poor bastard.
It was a union thing, right? Everyone paid in a little to the union, of course, and then everyone voted to the union, and the union would base their actions on the votes of the people that were part of it. And then they would take action based on those votes. What happened was the government said, you know what? We're sick of them making votes that's better for them. We're going to tell them it's no longer necessary for them to make dues at all. And they just did it to twist the fucking shit because they didn't want to pay people anymore, right? I was working a job, very technical mathematical job based on No Child Left Behind. And they paid like half of what you could make in the normal market. And all we wanted to do was gain a little ground. Just gain a little ground. and all they would do was shit on it. And so until you've actually worked in a fucking union atmosphere and understand what it was like to be shit on by the powers that be, I mean, it's one thing to just say all this bullshit you guys are saying, but until you live in it and see the crush come down and shit on you, then you don't know.
Zen, can I ask you a question? Well, if people saw the value of these unions, why didn't they continue to voluntarily give their money if it was giving them something back?
Because the government pushed down on it.
Because they are hangers. Why? If you're getting the benefits, like if you're getting the milk for free, why buy the cow? That's it, right?
No,
but you're saying that.
I just wanted to respond to
the fundamental claim is that. Hold on.
They don't realize they're getting fucked until it's gone. You don't know what you got until it's gone, baby. It's a sold story, you know.
All right, let's let Jason live real quick.
No, I'm just gonna say it's just what that is. You don't know what you got till it's gone. They don't know that they're losing this shit. They don't know that they're losing something in this until after it's not there.
I work for the Department of Education.
Okay.
I worked for the city of Detroit in the labor relations office and for a local suburb north of Detroit as a labor relations manager in the room negotiating with union stewards and their business agents, right, over wages and working conditions. All right. So I'm familiar with how collective bargaining agreements work, right? And so, for example, a employer, public or private, cannot simply and arbitrarily abandon a component of the collective bargaining agreement. The state simply didn't say, workers, you don't have to pay your union dues anymore. That was a product. The legislature can't do it either. The state doesn't have the authority to override those collectively bargained agreements. Otherwise, the NLRB gets involved, okay? So instead, what happens is...
No, the NLRB was fucking neutered.
Let the Bay Boy finish, and then you can respond to him. Go ahead.
And Prime, I think what you're fundamentally missing here is that... Look, union dues, right? So let's call it $35 a paycheck, okay? And that $35 is allocated in a couple different ways. Only a portion of that $35 actually goes to administering the collective bargaining agreement. There's another component of that money that goes off to, pay for the union to exist, right? Paying their union leadership, compensating them for whatever, okay? Then there's another component that actually goes to their political activities, right? That's the Beck case in Ohio that says, look, we're not going to compel you, worker, to pay for your union's political activities as a condition of your employment. This is why we see in many states that employees don't have to pay full union dues. They pay some administrative fee, which covers the cost of administering the CBA in their whatever employer they're working for. Okay, so Prime, do you think that workers, as a condition of their employment, should be compelled by the withholding of their paycheck, a portion of their pay, to pay for a union's political activities?
So I think this is probably your best argument right here. But I honestly have to put more thought into it, like exactly
I know it's
what
hard.
I think
it's a hard
about
question, right? Because
Yeah,
part of you wants to say, look, the union has to exist.
I have the answer.
One second, hold on,
enterprise,
Zen. Go ahead.
and
Go ahead,
as an
debate one.
enterprise, right, they need to exist, and as an enterprise, they need to lobby for their role in the economy and their role in society, right? And that has a cost. And workers, they are members of that organization, and they should contribute to that cost. But should their employment be conditioned on paying for that component
But
of cost?
our freedom and our it's conditioned that we pay our taxes, right? That like if you want to operate in this country, you got to pay your taxes. Unless you're a billionaire, then you don't have to. But for the rest of us, for you and I don't know what your income looks like, but like for you and I, I'm guessing we got to pay our taxes in upcoming months, right? When you're part of a corporation, you don't get a choice as to where they put their money either, right?
You don't pay them.
If they want to, yeah, like and like you can say, well, your employment isn't tied to it, but if you have a problem with that, where that money is going, well, then you'd have to leave there any which way, right? Like Flow Chase was trying to get to this, like the burden on the worker in terms of those who don't support the political action of that organization, whether it be the corporation or the union, is the same.
Where did the 40-hour work week come from? It came from unions.
No one's debating the benefits of unions and improving
Wait,
working
hold on.
conditions in the United States.
He has a. Hold on, the guy was
That
mentioning
is
the
not
40-hour
an
work
argument
week.
for union dues today.
Well, I'll stake out a position. I think that it is absolutely vital that right to work is abolished. I think that even if a portion of that paycheck, only a small portion goes to the administration and the make sure that everything is being carried out, and the rest is going to that union's political support. I think it's necessary. I think that unions need to propagate. I think they need to survive, and I'm willing to pay that money forward, even if the union is supporting
you're in the
something
union?
I don't politically agree with.
You're in the
I think we're
union?
misunderstanding what right to work is. So right to work,
Right to work is forcing union dues on people.
Right to work is anti-union.
Yeah, let debate board give it a try. What's right to work is?
Look, so right to work laws refer to state laws that prohibit essentially closed shop rules, or sometimes called union security agreements, where for the privilege of working at GE, you have to be a member of the union. Okay, what right to work states are saying is like, look, hey, we are not going to compel workers to belong to a union. However, those workers who do not voluntarily join the union, they will not be covered by the collective bargaining agreement. They do not receive the benefits of the negotiated compensation or working conditions. Okay, so
but what you're missing out is that it is an incentive to join the union, since
But that sounds like a good
regardless.
It is a good thing, GSU, because you're not compelling workers to join a union that, for the most part, doesn't really get them the net benefit that perhaps they did in the 40s and 50s and 60s. All right, because when we look at non-union wage scales and union wage scales for comparable work at local and state government levels, for example, they're comparable. They're almost exactly the same. In fact, they are exactly the same.
Can I agree with debate more for a second? Because I agree with you. It should not be compulsory. It should never be compulsory. But
and that's what right to work is.
But the thing is, like, if people do want to go ahead and contribute and be a part of that union, the people that should get the benefit of that are the people that are participating in that union. And the people that decided not to can go ahead and take less money. They can work all goddamn weekend for $10 less an hour and fuck off, because they don't have good collective bargaining, right?
Precisely.
I mean, I agree with you completely, and it could go bad either way, on either side of the business, right? But I don't think it should be compulsory. At first, when it happened, and this happened when I was actually working for the Department of Education in Kansas, it became non-compulsory, right? And a bunch of employees, like, were out on the smoke breaks or whatever.
Right to work isn't just about this portion of it. There are a lot of other
right? I mean, it was
laws
a weird
and
thing.
things
Like,
that go into it.
are we about to get screwed? Right. Or are we about to? Is something going to get better?
It's a culture. It's a right to work culture. The union busted break up the unions.
2010, and so I think it's turned out worse for workers and better for the businesses across the board.
Can I
I think you're wrong about.
I just wanted to say, because DebateBoard replied to me, I think that right to work inherently disadvantages uneducated workers, because I think not everybody joining these industries will immediately think to join a union. Some of them don't know how to even go about that. By taking that compulsory due out of their paycheck, they're immediately incentivized to say, okay, where is this money going? How do I join this union, right? Like, how do I get what I'm actually paying for, right? It is compulsory, sure, but I think that is I think it really bears out to be better for workers.
But if there was a culture that was so good for these workers with these unions, people would seek out that information, or they would hear about it from friends or from union members, and then they voluntarily submit themselves to that. But it seems like people aren't seeing this value.
So I don't think how much did you know about unions before this conversation, GSU?
I don't
know a terribly lot about it.
Okay, do you understand that's by design?
So as I understand it,
I would never
debate board is that federal law requires unions to represent all workers. so that when in right to work states, free riders, people who aren't paying the dues, are getting the benefits, right? So there's a collective bargaining that happens, and then those wages rise for all the workers. That they don't like just specifically go for union members, but like all the workers in that shop. That's my understanding.
That should be the court case from 2018, if I remember that correctly.
Wait, why would the union be mad that other people are getting it?
Because they aren't giving dues. Because then you have free riders who will say that, oh, since I don't have to give a portion of my paycheck, right? It's nice to have more money, like immediately in my paycheck, rather than give the money to maintain this collective bargaining. So those unions lose power.
But they're fighting on behalf of the workers, right? They shouldn't matter if the workers are
they need money. They need money.
Political donations, right?
It's like having a city. It's like having a city with 5,000 people and giving the city enough money to pay for 500 people to sustain life, right? That's exactly what you're doing with a union when you strip their ability to collect dues in these situations. They're representing all these people, but they don't have the infrastructure to represent as many people as they're having to represent at that point, because they're not getting paid for what it takes to have that infrastructure. Does that make
Jason
sense?
is right on the money here.
Or to do it as efficiently.
Yeah, GSU. I was just gonna say on this specific point, GSU. I think you're making the claim that more money for the workers is the end that the union would want, so they should be fine with free riders. But I think the point that people are trying to make is that if that were to continue, it would eventually lead to the death of the union, which then would be a net decrease in the money and the benefits that the union is able to bring home for the workers. So it'd be a loss in the net.
So is this thing
providing? I think I might have misunderstood an earlier point, and that was in right to work states, and even federal government employment. Workers can choose to pay an administrative fee. That fee is what the union tells the employer is the cost on a per person basis to administer the contract. So what you're calling free riders are not really free riders. They are enjoying the benefits of the contract, and they are paying, right, through a administrative or service fee for the administration of the contract. What they are not contributing funds toward are other, like, for example, political activities that the union engages in.
Can you give me a source for that? Can you give me a source for that so we can understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Please,
it's just another barrier, right? That's all it is. I mean, like, sure, it does stop you from contributing your paycheck towards their political activities, but that's just another barrier. It's just you can sign up for it.
It sounds like a good barrier, though. Y'all keep.
It does. It does. It sounds. You're absolutely right, GSU. It sounds like a good barrier, and that's what it's supposed to be.
I'll go even further. It is a barrier, because I think you were not understanding how affirmative I was being. It is a good thing.
I completely disagree. All of these barriers are just created to try to make it more difficult for unions to get the resources.
Taking advantage of? Yeah, for sure. It does sound like that.
I think that a big source of disagreement on whether or not these barriers are a good thing is the compulsory nature. And something that I kind of wanted to push back on, something I'm trying to get at earlier, I guess it's more of a question for GSU and specifically Debate Board. What about unions, a union's membership is compulsory? If the only consequence is loss of your employment, then I wouldn't think that this is any more compulsory than any other condition of employment that isn't required, right? If you don't do certain things at your job, your ass is going to get fired. And I don't think we would call that compulsory. And it seems to me that this is the same stakes that union membership is on.
I think I agree with that. I think I kind of agree with that.
I think my response to that would be in a closed shop environment. A condition of your employment is that you are required or compelled to join the union and to be represented by that union in all aspects of your employment. Okay, so when you choose to work for an employer and you have performance expectations and you fail to live up to those performance expectations, the employer has an interest in retaining you or terminating your employment. I don't see these things as close analogies or equivalencies that should suggest that workers be compelled to join a union.
Well, why?
Those
Because
have nothing to do with each other.
Because it would seem that there are many conditions of your employment: showing up on time, doing your job to an appropriate level, and lots of jobs are going to have plenty of other different requirements. Being vaccinated, for if one more topical example, and if a place of employment is a closed shop, then just another one of those conditions is paying dues to the union. So I don't see why we would single this out as being uniquely compulsory. If you're willing to call all the other conditions of employment compulsory as well, then I'm totally fine with that. But it feels like
it's actually democratizing the workplace because you have to vote on whether or not your shop is going to be unionized, which means the preponderance of workers at that point agreed through a democratized workplace that they wanted to unionize their shop. Okay,
yeah,
so then
at that point, it doesn't seem like
choose to come. Then you're buying into it. That's what it is.
Yeah, just at that point, it just doesn't seem like a big deal. Like, I don't have a problem with certain jobs compelling you to show up on time and stuff like that. If this is one of the conditions of employment, if you don't like that, then you can go work somewhere else. That's the great thing about a market economy. You've got other options.
But you're providing labor. Go ahead, Zen.
Unions don't protect you from that. That's the thing. That's bullshit. Unions don't protect you from shitty performance. They just don't.
I don't think they do.
And they shouldn't.
That's a fucked up misconception.
No, I don't. Sorry, if it came off like I was trying to say that, I'm not trying to say that. What I'm saying is that shitty performance could be a grounds to have you fired in an environment where where being a member of the union is required. That is also going to be grounds to being fired. I was just trying to establish that there are lots of things that a place of employment will compel you to do.
Okay. Yeah. So I read debate board. I read the your source, right? And you pointed out the sentence yourself, right? Employees may choose not to become union members and pay dues, or opt to pay only the share of dues used directly for representation, such as collective bargaining and contract administration, right? Like you were saying before. But the point is exactly the or, right? Yeah. You can opt out of paying dues or pay just that amount. But you can just decide, I'm not going to pay.
No. You're reading it wrong. So, Prime, it says, or opt to pay. It does not say opt out. It says you can choose to become a union member, or you can.
Oh yeah.
You can choose.
I agree with debate board if that's.
You can choose to pay only the share of dues used directly for representation.
Yeah. So yes, I'm saying, but you can choose not to.
Not to become a union member, yeah.
Yeah, and not to pay dues. Yeah. So what I'm saying.
But you can only pay dues if you don't become a union member, is what debate board is saying. That sentence says the or in there. The two conditions are: one, not become a union member, or to become a union member and pay the administrative dues.
No, that's what he's saying. I don't know
what it's saying. Sorry, now we'll put it on the VC chat. If you can put it in the VC chat debate board, I appreciate that.
I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. I'll do it. No worries.
So the page that I'm citing here is from the NLRB, right? And it's about union dues, and it talks about the amount of dues collected
in the VC chat
from employees are subject to federal, state laws, and court rulings. It further indicates that unions and employers can enter into union security agreements. Call it closed shop. It means to work there, you have to join the union. Mm-hmm. However, it also means that federal law also allows unions and employees to not enter into those union security agreements, or you have these right to work states. And if you work in a right to work state, you can choose right to become a member of that union, or you can opt, right, or choose to only pay a portion of the dues that you use for representation. You're not compelled to pay a portion of dues that would otherwise go to non-collective bargaining administration costs.
And here's what the problem is. Here's the problem is. So we're disagreeing with what this says, but hold on. I think what this is saying, from the other sources I've read, this seems to be what it's saying, right? There are two options. One, well, you could just be an employee, right? You could just be actually three options, right? You can become a member, a union member, a dues-paying union member, right? That's one option. Option two, opt not to join the union at all, right? And you do not pay dues. Option 3 is the middle option, in which you don't have to join, or at least you're just paying for your representation, right? At the very least, you're just paying for your representation. So option 2 is the problem. Option 2, where you're not part of the union and you aren't paying dues, because in option 2, you still get the benefits of the union, even though you're not paying. So you can just do that. Now it'd be nice. You could be kind and say, you know what, I'm going to pay at least for these administration fees, right? Because you're doing so much work for me. You can.
They should be compelled to join the union.
But
no.
No.
What I'm saying, no, because what I thought the debate board was saying was something else different, right? I'm saying get rid of option 2, right? And like for the other. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting confused with my fingers. For the third option, right? For the third option, then they don't have to join the union, but be forced to pay at least for the administrative fees, right? So if it's just two options, either join the union and paying the full dues, or not join the union and paying partial dues, then I'm okay with that. Then that I can work with. But if there's another option, I'm almost done, I promise. But there's another option that says you can become a free rider and not pay at all. That's the one I have a problem with, because the union is required by law to represent all of them, and so the benefits come to all the workers.
I'd agree.
Yeah, so I got a question for you.
I'd agree with you on that.
When somebody is not a part of the union, they advocate for themselves. Are they advocating for themselves?
No. The union is advocating for them. I mean, at least
they can't advocate for themselves.
Or at least, hold on. This is my understanding. If I'm incorrect, someone can correct me. My understanding is that they have collective bargaining, right? So the benefits of collective bargaining. The union is doing it for them. Now, I don't know if separately from that, a non-unionized member can go to the boss and say, "Can I get a separate deal?" I don't know that. That part I don't know.
Gotcha. Okay. But assuming
the answer is yes, they do. In the private sector, right, you just have the normal subordinate supervisor relationship, right, or worker employer relationship. In the public sector, it's a little bit different, because they generally have established compensation scales, and depending on what job you're in, you have a compensation scale. Think teachers, for example, or police officers, and you just progress, right? It's the benefits where typically what happens in the public sector is you see negotiated benefits like healthcare coverages, co-pays, employee contributions to that, pension contributions that are negotiated with your unions, and they tend to represent a lot of employees. To save on administrative costs, what public employers will do is simply adopt the same type of benefit scale, if you will, or benefits opportunities, right? Because they're not going to go negotiate with insurers for totally different healthcare coverages, right? So back where I worked in Detroit and for a northern suburb, the northern suburb was easier because they were smaller. We had a non-police, non-fire union, AFGE, and non-union employees essentially got the AFGE negotiated healthcare, pension contributions, and employee co-pays towards that stuff, because it was just simpler to administer. Right?
Yeah, the plan set up on all of that stuff is atrocious. So it sounds like the people that we're calling free riders here, systemically, they have to be. There is no other option, because they're not going to set up different plans because if you set up a plan for,
debate board, if you can mute yourself, we can hear you typing furiously again. Yeah, please.
No, but if we can't expect that the company is going to set up multiple plans for life insurance, dental, health, blah, 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 right? So it makes sense that those people are going to get the spoils from the collective bargaining, but they also do have the ability to fight for themselves, which is cool.
Y'all don't understand the basics of this, right? I mean, I'm 50. I saw all this happen. Right to work is really defined as right to be fired for nothing. Like it's
no, that's at
that.
Will. I believe
that's at will employment.
No, I know what you're saying. I hear you, but I saw it created. I saw how it happened.
Okay.
And so the right to work is actually the right to be fired for nothing. and it was a way to give corporations more power to drop people simply because they wanted to be involved in a union, or they wanted to get a raise, or they wanted anything. There was no protection for any job ever. You could get fired without cause, no matter what.
Yeah, that's at
right
will.
to work. Right to work. I know, but right to work is tied into that, and I know right to work is tied into unions too. But I saw this all happen. I watched it.
Okay.
Yeah, unions get union. This is how union formers get busted. It's all of these at-will states. I think he struck on a really important point. At-will and right to work together are two legislations that are designed to completely destroy the formations of unions
and workers' rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Arizona's big on both of those.
They can't be disentangled.
I wanted to bring that up because y'all are using those terms. You're talking just about unions, but the reality
it's a good point.
This was a movement to take away the rights of workers, to make you fired for nothing other than, oh, you're making $10 an hour now, but I could hire someone for $8, so fuck you, get out, and I'll hire someone for $8, right? And now that's the lay of the land. It didn't used to be.
Yeah.
And now everyone is losing those rights of keeping their own fucking job because they were good at their job, and now they're getting paid well, and it's gone because of these movements. That's all I'm trying to get across.
Oh, thank you for that. GSU, quickly, and I do want to hear from everyone else. See where you guys are at, because we've kind of moved a bit in this conversation.
Go ahead though. I wanted to ask one thing to Zen, but no, go ahead.
Okay. When it comes to, you were saying that it's kind of incidental that these workers get, the advantage of a better health insurance plan, for instance, because companies not going to do two health insurance plans, right? For the unionized ones and then the non-unionized ones. Okay, but one or the other, they're getting that benefit. And
for sure,
do you think that it makes sense, right? That they can get these benefits without having to contribute at all?
So I say yes, and this is why.
Okay.
If you say no to that question, what you're saying is you can't work here unless you do all this other stuff with the union. So you're like taking away their ability to work, and I don't like that.
No, they can work. No one's taking your ability to work. They can work.
Hold on. We're agreeing that inherent to the system, they're going to get the benefits from the union if they work there, right? We agree with that. All right. So if you're saying, hey, if to work here you have to pay into the union, I don't like that, because then that person doesn't have this as an option if they don't want to be associated with a union and they want to advocate for themselves. So if I want to work at a job and advocate for myself, I should be able to. I shouldn't be forced into the union and lose my ability to advocate for myself.
Yeah, but the problem is, if you're benefiting from the union's work, that's the issue. So
no, everybody.
All of us are. That's why unions are so great.
We helped everybody, even ununionized people, right?
I agree.
So they're going to be spoils. They're going to be spoils from unionized, like fighting and stuff. That helps all of us. But to say, hey, because unions exist and they're going to do something good, you must be a part of it is a lot to me.
But it's a benefit that all the workers are getting.
It's no different than paying your health
insurance. But it may not be the way the workers want to get it, right? I could want a different agreement with my employer than what the union is offering.
The healthcare plan?
No. Things would work.
Focusing on the healthcare plan. That's why I'm trying to. That's what I'm.
No. The healthcare plan, you can't get something different there. I'm just saying, like salary, blah blah blah. You could when you can advocate for yourself, you get to determine what you and your employer's relationship is. Versus, I got to go work through some union leader.
Yeah, but GSU, the problem with saying that is that it has been borne out over history, right? At least in the United States, that unions are always better equipped to bargain on your behalf than the individual worker.
No, because the union is bargaining collectively. Hold on. The union is bargaining collectively, which means that it can't be better for you, especially if you're like a good employee. It can't be better for you to collectively bargain for everybody versus individually bargaining for you.
It absolutely can.
Unless you're of the lower end of workers.
Yeah, absolutely can.
Lower end, I'm talking about performance.
When you have the power to strike, to literally shut things down because you are an entity.
It doesn't matter if I got to get the same salary as everybody else and I want more. So imagine this. Let's just say I want to make $6 an hour and union is able to collectively bargain for $5. But I want $6 an hour because I feel like, hey, I'm important. So I really want to fight for more than what the union is offering. The union has collectively gotten them guys to get $5 an hour, but I want $6 for myself. I feel like in every situation, I should be able to argue with that company personally for myself and say, hey, I want $6. I don't give a fuck what those other want. I'm raw at what I do.
And they're going to say, fuck you, we'll go get a union guy. That's exactly what they're going to say at that point.
Because what we just had is a complete throwaway of what collective bargaining is versus why you would bargain for yourself, right? So Gambit, your statement would then become, I provide more value than every other worker that does my same job, is what you're saying.
It could be,
so,
yeah.
So if there are 7 people on a line, you are more productive than those 7 people.
I'm not saying I'm saying I'm more productive than any of those individual 7, not the entire 7. I'm saying that me as a worker.
Correct.
No, you have a chance of arguing for the higher raise by yourself.
But that's not the point of collective bargaining. It has to be
we're talking about people that don't want to collectively bargain.
Yes.
Yes, but if you don't want to collectively bargain, then your job's gonna laugh you right out of that meeting room, and you're not gonna get the wage that you think you're
owed. Your statement would have to be, I work better than those 7 people.
No, it doesn't.
Collectively.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so
the idea of individual bargaining is just not borne out in history. Collective bargaining has always secured better salaries, better benefits for the workers. You may you may
bargain for myself. And it's pretty awesome.
Gambit.
Okay, and how successful are you with that?
You may be the most.
He's actually very successful.
Worker.
Very successful with that.
GSU, I have no doubt that you are very successful at it, right? But we have to look at these from like a larger scale than just you, right? Like you're not.
Yeah, no, I do. Hold on, wait. Let me build a bridge with you.
And before you do that, because I want to let you go right next. Hey guys, help us out with the channel. Support this channel. Zin already gifted a sub and some bits off the kind of them, but support this channel. We always providing you this content, providing the space. Subs to the channel, gift bits or give subs. Let's see if we can start a hype train here. That'd be actually really great. Yes. But yeah, if you're enjoying this content, then support this content so I can do this. Don't be a free rider, right? Don't be a free rider. And assist making this content possible. This content's possible because people like Zin are so kind to give bits or to give the sub or to sub themselves, right? So help us out, sub to the channel, gift bits or gift subs. Let's see if we can start a hype train. That'd be pretty amazing. Continue, GSU.
Let me go look at chat. I don't want to see any free riders in chat. If you ain't got a badge beside your name,
why don't you turn off that ad block just for fun?
You need to get. Hold on. Let me.
Help me.
Sorry. Let him finish his point.
Hold on. That's what I was about to say. Okay, based. So remember, I'm not advocating for the abolishment of unions. I've advocated for the ability for individuals to represent themselves. I know. So hold on. In the situation that you said, if there are people that want to go with the collective bargaining route, I think they should have that freedom. For sure. But if there are other people who say, fuck that, I want to bargain for myself, I also agree with that. So in the situation that you named, yeah, there can be people at the company that collectively bargain and they take whatever the low wage the union fights for them. But there are going to be other people that say, I want more than what the union is offering.
Yeah, but you run into a lot of problems when you approach it from like that sort of thinking. Like even if there are people at all these jobs, that don't want to unionize, right? If that leads towards a trend, right? These unions like survive off of those employees, and not only are you benefiting, right, from existing under that collective bargaining, even if you don't want to pay in, even if you think you can bargain better for yourself, right?
Yeah, but I agree with you.
Which I don't believe is historically borne out.
I agree with you that it's harmful to the union, but I don't think it should be compulsory just because we think, hey, this person might not be able to advocate for themselves. That seems weird to me to say, hey, because I think I know best for your life, I'm not going to allow you to represent yourself, and you have to be represented by the union.
But you're not even
so what? You don't have to work at that shop,
GSU, you got muted for 10 minutes by a donation. Thank you for the donation. Wow. Much appreciated. 10 minutes.
Oh my god.
Okay. Well, nobody should have responded to GSU for the time being because he can't defend himself.
Honestly. Don't worry, I'll attack him fucking mercilessly.
All right, well, it's your show, sir.
Eli, go ahead.
Monty.
I was gonna say, like, I don't. It just seems like he's got the concept of unions backwards. Because if you're gonna sit here and say, "Oh, I can advocate for more for myself," the thing is, you have a better chance of doing that with a union than you do by yourself. So what even? I mean, I get the whole idea of freedom, but like, it doesn't really seem like there's a point to it if you're not going to get anywhere by yourself, because you by yourself without somebody else backing you have no power against your employer that literally has way more capital than you probably ever will in your entire life. So I don't get this idea that, like, I don't get where this comes from, this idea that you by yourself that you could take this very cancerous individualistic approach to try to fix a systemic problem that no one person can solve or get ahead in by just advocating by themselves. And again, like I said, you will have a better chance of getting that higher wage if you do it through collective bargaining than you would if you were just by yourself. And I don't understand why he does not get that.
Well, I don't think GSU is trying to make that argument, though. I think what GSU fundamentally is saying is, look, I don't want to be compelled to join a union. That seems coercive. That seems anti-worker.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, that seems fine. That's fine. But like when he talks about it, it just seems as though it seems as though he has it backwards. But
I don't think GSU is really familiar with unions. The kind of the concept behind unions, the approaches you guys are taking in terms of talking about collective bargaining, how it applies to unions. He wants to be able to negotiate on his own behalf, but really, he's not really negotiating on his behalf. He's applying to, a lot of us, we apply to a job. That job has a starting salary, whether it's a point on a scale or it's a range, and then we get hired. And in that hiring process, we talk to the employer about our wage. We see huge groups of employees in the country making gobs of money who are not unionized, right? That's not because of some magic, right? I mean, that's because their employers are choosing to pay them gobs of cash.
I think that's just false descriptively. I mean, you're talking about a very small minority of the population. You should be looking instead to the industries that employ the majority of Americans. And in those cases, what you're saying is just it's obviously false. And
no, for example, let's look at hospital systems across the country. Their IT workers are not unionized like their nurses are. Right, their doctors are not unionized like their nurses are. Yet these millions of them are getting paid, upwards of $200,000 a year for doctors, over $100,000 a year for IT people, and they're not unionized. Right?
Do you say nurses aren't unionized?
No, he said
nurses are unionized.
He said nurses are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I'm sorry.
So while we recognize the power of collective bargaining to gain wages and positive benefits or working conditions, right? Collective bargaining isn't absolutely necessary to secure high wages in the country.
That's a false equivalency, though.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a very false equivalency. May I? When you're talking about doctors, you're talking about highly skilled labor. You're not talking about something that electricians and independent contractors.
Specialized.
Let Radif get it out. You had a chance to talk. Please go ahead.
We're talking about people with maybe 8 years of college experience. We're talking about people who, join that field because of the high pay. They can independent, and the fact of the matter is that they kind of serve as their own independent contractors that service themselves. they can go out and make their own businesses, but
Well, no, I'm talking about, for example, civil and mechanical engineers who work for private firms across the country that are making over $150,000 a year. I mean, it's a lot of money without being unionized. Now, I think what you want to say.
I don't know if you saw what I dropped in chat, but I dropped what Economic Policy Institute said on 2012 on right to work versus non-right to work.
Okay, but we're not talking about right to work versus non-right to work right now. We're talking about an appeal to false equivalency. Right. And what I'm telling you is that across the country, you can see where large groups of employees in these occupational areas are making gobs of money without union representation. Now, if you want to say that union representation is more important to lower level wage earners.
This gobs of money is
pointing to highly skilled labor.
You
can't compare.
This gobs of money is
He was just getting there. He was just getting there.
I'm not comparing them.
What he was doing was incorrect.
Versus not.
Nurses, right, versus tech workers. That is not a equivalent.
No one's comparing.
Hold on. What you need? No, but you're saying that both these individuals, these groups, draw high salaries, right? And you're saying that there's the unionized nurses draw those high salaries, but if you look over tech workers, then they're able to do that as well. No, instead, what you need to be doing is unionized workers within the same field versus non-unionized workers. For instance, teachers, right? There are unionized teachers and there's non-unionized teachers, and comparing their pay. That's the thing that's important, not the fact that there happens to be other workers in another segment of the economy that happens to also have high amount of money.
That may not necessarily be the argument that you want to make, because he's going to have and point to the privatized industry of private schools versus public schools who have a limited amount of funds. So when you look at those scales, a private teacher makes, I wish I could tell the exact number, but I think we would all kind of agree that a teacher in a private school would make more money than a teacher in a public school.
That isn't borne out. That's not borne out.
No. Like in terms of what was it?
It's highly dependent on the private school, the type of private school.
Well, I think you guys missed the point that I was making, and that was we keep hearing these appeals to the power of collective bargaining, and we're not disagreeing with that. What I was referring to was GSU's, I think, argument, which is, look, I don't want to be compelled to join a union. I want to be able to talk to my employer about my wages and conditions of employment and not have to rely on a union to negotiate that on my behalf. And if I don't want to join that union, I don't want to be fired from my job. I think that's his argument.
Yeah, that is.
If I could, real quick, I got to take off, guys. It's been wonderful.
See you, Zen.
I'm in a different
Great
place. We got a nice storm. I love the debate. I love being able to really talk about both sides of all the issues. I'll be doing some Dying Light 2 tomorrow. Cheers.
Thank you for your perspective, sir.
Yeah.
Love you, Zen.
Hell yeah, you guys are awesome.
Okay. Yeah, but the rest, go ahead. Whoever wants to jump in.
I just wanted to ask. I originally wanted to ask GSU again with this, but he's still muted, so I guess I can ask.
He's got 2 more minutes, then he'll be on mute.
Okay. Then yeah. So someone else go ahead. I can wait.
Man, inflation's pretty bad, right?
No. Yeah. So debate board. Then I'll take this opportunity while we're waiting for GSU. 2 more minutes for him. You're saying you're not debating the power of collective bargaining. Okay. Then why were you comparing these workers within different segments of the industry, right? Like what GSU does, right? And I know GSU is actually very good at his job. He does something very specialized, and so he can command a high salary. Yes, you don't need a union when you're in a specialized field, right, with specialized knowledge, and you can negotiate a high salary, right? Especially when you're in the upper echelons of what he does, and that's what GSU is at. He's at the upper echelons of the IT industry. So you can do that, right? And but like most workers in most fields. Can't. They aren't in that category, right?
Yeah, I would describe GSU as an outlier if everything you said, Prime, is the case, and that I think that we're not really talking about people that are highly skilled, that are like strongly in demand. I think mostly when we're talking about workers, we're trying to appeal towards people who don't have those sort of protections, right? That is the issue that we're ultimately trying to address. We're trying to give power to the powerless, right? And that's why, that's why we have unions, so that the little guy can bargain against larger corporations, companies, etc.
I think, Prime, what my point was trying to be is, look, we see large groups and segments of employment in the United States that is not represented by unions, and they make gobs of money. Now, the knock against that point, like you just said, is, well, yeah, sure, lawyers, doctors, engineers, those are highly specialized areas that require high levels of credentials, and they command higher salaries. So that doesn't, recognizing that fact doesn't really help us understand whether or not compulsory union representation should be, or union membership should be required for more unskilled labor, right? Or skilled trade stuff, like vocational trade stuff, right? Because maybe it's there where they really can't, plumbers can't command high salaries on their own. So maybe your guys' argument are, well, look, that's where compulsory union membership ought to exist. They must be compelled to join a union so that they enjoy the benefits of collective bargaining.
No, I agree to debate board, and just you're unmuted. Debate board. I've already given you
pay more money.
I've already at least I can't speak for the others. But like for me, I've already given to that, like, yeah, not compulsory, but at the very least, right, whether you want to join or not, you should be paying for those like partial dues, as we discussed previously, right? Like if you're getting benefits, okay, then you and I have reached an agreement. That's fantastic. But then,
hold on, but it's impossible to not, because it's impossible to not get those benefits. So you are saying you're going to set up a world where either you can't work or you have to join the union.
No, you don't have to join the union. You can pay partial dues for the work that's being done on your behalf.
Yeah, but what if they don't value that? They're like, hey, I don't want to give these fuckers my money. They're not helping me. I'm
GSU, you're receiving a service and you're paying for it, right? So unless you want to abolish taxes, right? Like maybe you shouldn't be like driving on the roads.
Wait,
like
you just might.
Wait, who? How does this relate to taxes? You're talking about whether somebody needs to compulsorily join a union that inevitably. Hold on. Y'all not letting me talk. You're not understanding that the union has to advocate the way that it does. The existence of it necessitates that it does. And you're saying that because they exist, everyone must join, and that's ridiculous.
Can we separate something else to like drill down on the question, maybe?
That's what I would say.
If I was to say, Gambit, if I was to tell you that let's just pretend that there's no outside influence on a political system in between cooperating workers and an individual, do you think that if you were in a union that only argued for higher wages and no outside lobbying or anything like that, and the only discussion was to lobby for higher wages for those collective workers, do you think then it should be compulsory?
I'm not sure I understood your question, but it ended with, should it be compulsory? So my answer is no. I'm not sure I understood the question.
He's just against any compulsory admission to a union.
If you can restate that question, I didn't follow completely too. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's like freedom of association at its root, right? Like, I don't want to associate with this thing. I shall have the right not to, regardless of any systemic progress they may be doing for me.
Well, you can object to union membership on religious grounds, but in that case, you have to pay an amount equal to the dues to a non-religious charitable organization. So you do get your freedom of association there.
I think, but you're saying I gotta pay something just because I want to exist outside of this construct. I don't
just because you want to work for this company. Like, let's come on.
No,
it's just because you want to work
I should be able to work for this company regardless if there's a union there.
Well, hold on, GSU. This is the question I wanted to ask you.
I assume you're okay with. It's totally fine. I assume you're okay with an employer saying if you don't do these certain things to employee, you'll be fired. For example, like showing up on time, stuff like this, basic stuff, right? My question is,
are you paying your contract? Yes, of course.
Yeah. So my problem is. The employer, in the instance of a closed shop where you have to be part of the union, that the employer has agreed to an organization with the union, right? The employer is the one that's firing you, not the union.
How you doing today?
The employer is the only one that wields that power. So I'm just curious then, why is it that you object to this? What is unique about this requirement that an employer is giving of you, and compared to any of the other requirements? Why do you have such ill will against this specific one?
The union isn't paying me, and I'm not working for them.
Okay, but
they're relevant to my life, so why should I be forced? Why should I A, be forced to it, or B, have to pay them money just because they exist? They don't pay my wages. They don't negotiate for my wages. I don't care about them. They don't materially impact my life.
Yeah, they can negotiate for your wages.
I'm willing to concede all that. I'm willing to concede all that. Let's say, for example, this union doesn't do anything. Here's a better example. Let's imagine, right? We can take that charity example. That an employer says, if you want to work here, you have to donate 5% of every time you get a paycheck. You have to donate 5% of that to a charity. Right? Or what if they even said we have?
Yeah, I would hate something like that. I donate to our super PAC right now, but I do that because I want to.
Yes, I understand not liking that, but my curiosity comes from I don't see why an employer should be banned from having that as a condition of their employment. If you don't want to associate with that, then that's them.
Wait, let me be clear. If an employer had a procedure where they force people to give them money as a means of employment, I would be against that just as much.
Well, I guess I want to clarify here. Would you be against that as in, I think that's a bad idea? Or would you say an employer should not be allowed to leverage this condition of employment?
I don't think an employer should be allowed to leverage that at all. Like, what? The worker must give you money to work at your job? Outside of some weird thing where it's like a setup thing?
Yeah. Insurance, you beat me to it.
You can see it as like paying for insurance because they're gonna look out for you if your boss says some racist shit to you.
Yes, if you think that you need that insurance, yes, I agree that you can get that insurance, but that insurance shouldn't be compulsory.
What about doctors? Doctors are required to get medical insurance. Am I incorrect in this? I believe they're required to get medical insurance.
Liability.
For sure. Insurance. Okay, but then that's to work. I don't want to.
They're not paying that to their employer though.
But yeah, that's fine. But it's a cut out of your paycheck.
It's a fact of being a corporation in a field where you can do damage to people. That's different. You're paying that. You're not paying that to your employer. You're not showing up at work
to your employer. You're paying it to a union that's working on your behalf, just like an insurance company
that's my
would
point.
be for a doctor, so that they don't end up going to prison because they accidentally killed somebody on an operating room table.
Quick point. Let me jump in here real quick. So GSU, I think what might be important here is I think GSU's argument is really against the employer, not the union, because a closed shop just doesn't arise out of the ether. A closed shop exists, or a union security agreement exists, because the employer and the union have negotiated this component of their collective bargaining and their exclusive rights to represent certain workers. So really, I think, Gambit, I think what you're really arguing is you don't want to work for an employer who's going to compel you and put your job in jeopardy because you don't want to join a union. It's not so much the union's problem. It's the employer who is engaged in an agreement, to conditionalize union membership as a condition of employment. And then that gets back to Flo's point, which is, okay, this is just another condition of employment, such as wearing steel-toed boots that you have to buy with your own money, or that you have to show up on time, or so on and so forth. So really the argument is against the employer, not so much against the union or union membership generally.
I agree with you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm still having trouble understanding why we would be okay with employers having conditions of employment that they mandate for all sorts of other things, but this specific one is something where we draw the line. Now, I can understand personally you saying I would never work in a place like that, but that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about saying that there is a problem where there's a problem if employers can do this.
Do you think it's unreasonable to have, you're equating all of these other conditions of employment to a recurring fee that you'll pay forever? These things are just not equal at all.
I understand they're not equal in terms of the literal reality of what they are, but I don't see how that difference meaningfully differentiates it to the point where we can say, okay, this is not something you can...
signed up to a subscription? Like, what?
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Let me put it this way. I tried to put it this way before. Think of like how you pay into your work, like the insurance, right? What a union does is they make sure that your wages are
I can choose to not have insurance.
Okay, well...
if you're an independent contractor, sure.
I don't know.
No, you're talking about an employer versus an employee, Prime. Hold on 1 second. Prime, you're talking about an employer versus an employee.
No, I understand what you're trying to tell me here. I apologize.
It's the employers that are forced into that medical malpractice.
The employee has to get malpractice insurance for doctors. If unless I'm mistaken about this, but the employee, the doctor, has to get malpractice insurance to practice.
It's a condition of their licensing.
Yeah.
It's not a condition really of
maybe
employment.
it is.
It's really
Maybe
to
it
get
is.
that license and maintain it.
And you have to pay for
but it's the same thing. If you literally just can't work without losing this piece. I don't know. So like I don't know why you would split hairs as to where exactly the money goes. Just that like you're going to be losing that money. You have no choice. This is coming out of your paycheck. It's got to happen. Right? In this case, we're just saying you're getting into an organization that's going to fight to protect you in case like your employer decides to abuse you somehow, right? Either physically, sexually, or financially abuse you, and also get higher wage. And also,
only some states require doctors to have medical malpractice. There's no federal law requiring doctors to have medical
in those
malpractice,
states,
but some
those
states
that do,
and
those states that do, and those states that do, fine. And those states that do. Wouldn't it be the same?
It isn't. It isn't. The reason why the medical malpractice exists is because you operate on people and you could do tons and tons of damage to people's lives, and this money is to like help this insurance is to help the victim of maybe something either malicious or mistaken. So having this system,
to help the doctor avoid legal liability for malpractice claims. It protects the doctor so that they're not financially ruined, right? When they cut off a finger
if
on
a
the
doctor,
wrong hand.
If a doctor makes a mistake, this doesn't help him with that he may have to pay out.
The
idea is right.
Compensates the victim, if you will, the victim or the patient.
Yeah, that's what. That's what I
rather
was
than
saying.
the doctor's pocket.
No, that's what I was saying. That's exactly what I was saying. So I was saying that this system is set up because, and I wish police had have this, but this system is set up because this person is in a highly important configuration. They can affect the livelihood of others in a really bad way. So this insurance is being requested by the state, first off, not by the employer, but it's being requested by the state in order to protect possible victims.
By the way,
it's a completely different scenario.
When you bring up as far as like talking about police, it's actually they're talking about bringing that up as far as they're going to take that money for malpractice for police officers out of the pension fund.
Yeah,
out of that union.
That's why I thought it was so funny because they do have something like that. It's the police unions.
No, I'm talking about medical malpractice. I'm talking about medical malpractice, not about like do they have unions for the police?
Right.
GSU. Sorry, I was going to say JITS. Or go ahead, Will. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Flo had a question earlier, and I think this sort of should address GSU's point here. Is GSU employers who choose to enter into a closed shop agreement with a union is exercising their own judgment, right, and discretion to voluntarily enter into this agreement. Flo, your earlier question was, should employers be banned from being closed shop employers? And the answer is no, they shouldn't be, because we want employers to have the opportunity to negotiate with unions on that component and to establish that working condition.
In that configuration, because of I think this is hilariously I think this is against the worker and what the worker's right. So I'm absolutely okay with the state mandating that this configuration is not possible because the worker has no ability to advocate for themselves in that situation, which is what
that's right. You're absolutely right. It is anti-worker in an element, right? Because it does compel behavior that the worker might not.
Yeah. So I'm for the state saying I want my workers to have bit more freedom, and I'm for the state stepping in and saying, hey, you can't do these type of things.
It just depends on whether you're more for an individualistic perspective or a collective one, but collectively,
well, I'm okay with people collectivizing, but it shouldn't be compelled. That's all. I'm okay. Everyone, all of y'all could join a union. I'll pat you on the back. Well, I might not, but I pat you on the back and I say, oh, you've indebted yourself to low wages. But yeah, like it's possible that people could want to do that, and they should have the ability to do that. I'm just saying that the opposite should also exist. I should have the ability. It's like, why shouldn't I have the ability to advocate for myself? Like, why would we remove the personal freedom?
I think that's why I asked my earlier question. Is it may be more fundamental for you, especially. I don't know what the hell your career is, but apparently everybody likes to say that you're pretty good.
I'm a software architect.
Oh, okay. No shit. No wonder. So the question now becomes like, could you outwork those 5 people, right? The question that I had asked earlier.
I want to explain this to you. It's not that you can outwork those 5 people, even though I believe I could outwork 5 people, but it's not that part is not important here. Your company pays each of you as individuals. When I say I want more money, I'm saying that other individuals that do the job that I do, I'm more worthy to you than those individuals. I'm not saying I'm more worthy than the whole of everybody else who does my job. So when I advocate for myself, I'm saying, hey, you have this position, and a lot of us do this position, and I'm saying that I do this position so much better, such that you should pay me disproportionately more than you pay them.
Correct. So now let's say that those 5 workers come together and say, we want to be paid more. And the employer has to either decide whether or not, let's say that in the budget it only allocates that you're asking for the exact same amount of pay that these 5 workers are asking for. In this case, would the employer then choose you over these 5 workers?
Because I output the work of 5 people, they would say, I'm sorry, Mr. Union guys, but we can't give you that raise. But they wouldn't tell you that it's because they gave me the raise. It just, your union leaders would come up with some bullshit and say, hey, maybe we'll try again next year.
I think one of the problems that we need to address is that, Gambit, you're occupying a completely different landscape than like the majority of Americans, right? And just as like any new industry, right, it is like going to be subject to shifts and changes, right? There may be a time in the future, right, where unions are preferable to have, where perhaps your highly valued skill set now will become will lose demand, right? And you will need unions like to collectively bargain, right? But I understand this is the position you're in now, but we're talking, the reason why we think it's compulsory is because it's occupying a completely different reality than the one that you're existing in right now. And I don't think that you like earlier you said something to the effect of bargain for your lower wages. It's like, but you don't understand, they're bargaining historically, like throughout history, right? They've always gotten better wages in unions through collective bargaining than other people in their field. So I don't know. Have you never like worked like a service job? Have you like?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to respond to this. So it is true that I'm in a far different situation now. But even before I was in this situation, I had this same mentality. I was gonna bust my ass at work so that I could argue for more and get more. And if people didn't give me more, then either I was going to leave or they were going to find a way that they could give me more. This is a position I've adopted just because of the situation that I'm in now. I would even say this mentality is why I'm in the situation I'm in now. Like,
I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. Because here's the thing: when you're a McDonald's
tell the
worker,
person what he believes.
When you're a McDonald's worker, I'm not telling him what he believes. I'm telling him what I believe. Because when you're a McDonald's worker, if you have that that attitude, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just gonna keep getting shut out. I've known people that had the same attitude as you, and just because they have that attitude, they've lost plenty of opportunities.
When I was in college, hold on.
Yeah,
let me make this more clear for you, because it seems like you think things that actually exist don't exist, and this is just a mindset problem. I worked on a college campus, and all of us were the exact same wage. There were millions, well, not millions, obviously, right, because it was college campus, but there was tens of thousands of people who would have wanted my job, right? I did my job so well that I told them, hey, I don't give a fuck that there's 1,000 college students that you can call up to get my job right now. You're gonna pay me more because I'm actually raw at this shit, and they pay me more. Like I don't give a fuck what McDonald's. I don't give a fuck what configuration it is. My goal is to out other people and demand more, and that's how you progress. I don't care what the job is.
Yeah, I think we're just occupying like completely different material realities.
I'm not sure if we can actually get any farther. I'm not sure if we can get any farther because I've been in circles. And
I don't know. On a fundamental level, I do think it. I mean, I do believe that like you should be paid for your work output, like on a fundamental level, and it like just because you shouldn't take the average of everybody's output and then generalize it into a wage. On that, and to that degree, I agree. But like, I don't know.
Yeah,
you can't just dismiss
people that are in
unions
unions
as a
aren't
whole.
all paid the same wage.
Yeah,
Like,
there
that's-
is merit raises and stuff like
Yeah,
that. in
there's
unions,
yeah, it's over time though. So like if you're starting out,
it's not just overtime. Like they have
and
bonuses.
you have to keep in mind that companies negotiate wages with the unions based on just like on a general scope.
You might have to buy into all other kind of bullshit rules. Like I don't know, man. I'm different. Like I do shit like I'll be late for work, and if I'm in a union and there's this strict policy and all of this shit, and like, oh, you're fired if you're late 4 times. Fuck that. I'm late when I get ready, but I'm gonna be awesome when I'm there, and you're gonna have to deal with it, and you're gonna pay more. Like that's my mentality. I don't give a fuck about. I set the rules that I have with my employer, not somebody else.
I honestly think this topic's a little butchered. So
yeah,
if you wanna...
I don't think we get any farther.
No,
here.
we've hit a wall with an intractable difference of opinion, right?
Yeah.
Neither side's going to.
We'll leave it here. We didn't get much support today. We'll have to.
One thing. Somebody, I just gotta address this. Somebody in chat